The town of Anderson, South Carolina, sits in the northwest corner of the state.
It's very different than it was 10 years ago. And we had a much larger violent crime problem 10 years ago than we do now.
10 years ago, if we had one shooting, we were all on our toes because we knew another one was coming, whether it be a retaliation or what have you. If we had one, you're gonna have another.
Just before 10 p.m. on June 7, 2014, 911 operators get a call about a shooting in an area known as the Horseshoe.
The Horseshoe is a place down in the lower end of Anderson, the southern end. It comes in off of a side street, and they call it a horseshoe because it goes around and circles back to the initial road it came from. So deputies were already on the way to the Horseshoe, and then the hospital called us.
We got reported that there were 2 gunshot victims that had arrived at the hospital.
I'm at the ER. 2 cars just pulled up with black males who were shot multiple times.
Have you asked them where it happened at or anything?
I don't know anything. It's absolute chaos.
Is there 2 of them, you said?
There's 2 that are shot. There's about 16 people out here all just screaming and running around.
Anderson County Emergency Services.
We are combating some crowd out here. Could you send me some city officers here to back us up, please?
Officers are dispatched to both locations. As they arrive at the hospital, one of the victims is still in the car he arrived in. A nurse attempts to help him.
The car was shaking. The lady was in there trying to give him CPR, you know. My daddy had to actually help her get him out the car and put him on a stretcher.
From the crowd, the officers learn the man is a 20-year-old local celebrity.
Brandon Willingham was an aspiring rapper, pretty well known to that, at least the local rap community. He was known as Jud Money.
He has a lot of fans. He has lots of friends, lots of supporters. Everyone wants to know what's going on. They've heard about the shooting, so folks are flooding the parking lot.
The other victim, his friend, is already inside being treated for his injuries.
Rayshawn Cowan, he's the other guy who got shot. We call him Cujo.
Rayshawn Cowan has been hit 4 times in his right shoulder, his hip, his thigh, and his buttocks. His friend Brandon Willingham has been hit once. Brandon has been hit in his abdomen.
As doctors work on the victims, local media gets a hold of the story.
Before we got in there and sat down, the news people had reported that a guy had passed away from the shooting that happened on Southside.
They had already put it on the news and Facebook that one person was dead and one person was alive.
I saw Cujo's mom and them like over on the other waiting side. Me and her were both looking at each other because we knew somebody was dead. So we're looking at each other, I guess, really like hoping, which is bad to say, but hoping that I'm not going to be the one.
Born on July 14, 1993, Brandon was the first child of April Summerall and Kelly Willingham.
The day Brandon was born is like one of the best days of my life because I had a son. And for me to sit there and witness that, because I ain't never seen nothing like that before in my life. And when I got a hold in my hand and looked at him, a whole lot changed. You know, I got a son. It's my son. He's named after me, Brandon Kelly Lamont Willingham. So I got me a junior named right after me.
Becoming a mom to Brandon, that day I learned what true love was when I looked into his eyes. It gave me a whole new meaning of life because of Brandon. I knew I had somebody to live for and somebody who was going to depend on me and somebody to give me a life that was worth living.
Brandon was raised in Anderson with his sister, Brianna.
Me and my brother, Brandon, we're like twins. We're only 10 months apart, so anything he wanted to do, I wanted to do it. We were really close.
I wasn't in his life long because I went to prison. He was like 18 months when I went to jail.
My daddy got arrested when I was 4 months old. You know, he still sent Christmas gifts.
I used to talk to him and my dog. I used to talk to all of them when I was locked up.
By the time Brandon was in middle school, he had another sister, Bree Shanae. April had to spend long hours away working to support her 3 kids.
I was like a hard worker. I was a single mom for so many years until I met my husband. So when I finally met somebody who was willing to love them and me, that changed my whole life.
April and Jeremy married in 2007. Around that same time, Brandon started having trouble at school.
Brandon was such a class clown. He drew a picture of SpongeBob smoking a joint that called me at work. And so when I had to go to school, I was so pissed off at Brandon. I was like, I'm going to kill this child. And I mean, I was hot because my job was like an hour away. Then when I got there and they handed me the picture, I had to hold the laugh in because he could draw really well.
He's getting expelled, so he's going to alternative school. My mama's trying to discipline him. Now, mind you, me and my sister, we understood, we good.
I think he liked alternative school, though. I really do. He was in there for 3 years. I mean, he was like the little leader person.
In 2011, April and Jeremy welcomed twin boys.
He wasn't happy about them at first. When he found out I was having boys, I think it broke his heart because he was always my only son. But once they got here, he loved his brothers.
What his family didn't know is that Brandon had been quietly nursing a dream.
The whole music thing took me, I'll just be honest, completely by storm. One day he said, and at this point, he was probably 18, he said, Mom, I'm gonna be a rapper. I said, really? I said, that's a good dream, but in the meantime, you need to get a job. And Brandon was like, no, Mom, I'm for real.
In 2012, Brandon got the chance to share his dream with his father.
When I was locked up, I did not know he could rap. I did 18 years, 9 months. When I got out of prison, he came pick me up.
Brandon threw himself into his music. He took his childhood nickname and turned it into a name he hoped would be known around the world.
Say you go to the store and you out there selling some apples, you jugging, you getting money. It's just a slang. He used to always jugging, trying to make a little $quarter something when he was little, and they just called him Jug Shoes.
He just changed his name to Jug Money. Everybody was calling him Jug, and it sounded good.
He was just full force on that music, and it all happened with him and the music. In a year's time, he was doing shows, and I mean, booking shows week after week after week. One Battle of Atlanta, he made the deal with his promoter and his manager. He released that CD.
I was in college when he first started rapping, so I would just come home, hear the music, going back to college and make everybody else hear it.
To say that Jug Money was an up-and-coming artist is an understatement. I mean, he was really, really on his way. He was a big deal, and he was becoming an even bigger deal.
He wanted a lot for himself and his family. And said, Pop, what kind of car you want? I was mess with him. I want a Ferrari or something like that. He said, we're going to get it one day. And that's what he believed in, so I believed in him, and Anderson believed in him, too.
On June 7, 2014, a shooting lands Brandon and his friend Rayshawn in the emergency room at Anderson Medical Center.
News traveled very fast, so between the local newspaper, TV stations, once the shooting occurred, folks knew about it. Facebook was blowing up because of who Brandon was.
Local media reports that one of the men has died.
You've got family members from both boys' families, Brandon, Rayshawn. They're both there at the hospital, tensely waiting.
I see the corner man come out, telling us to go in his room. I went straight out the door. I ain't going in no room, I already knew.
The tragic news was that Brandon Willingham had indeed passed away.
His blood pressure plummeted because he got hit in that main aorta.
Everybody had done part and got out the cars and kind of like swarmed the outside of the hospital like a big old memorial waiting. And so when I came out, I was screaming, who did this? And who did this? Who did this?
Arrives at the hospital where rapper Brandon Willingham, also known as Jug Money, has just succumbed to a gunshot wound to the abdomen.
There was a bunch of people at the hospital. There was a vehicle that was roped off that the victim arrived to the hospital in. The police were standing by, had that secure.
Brandon's friend was also shot, but survived.
Rayshawn Cowan has been hit 4 times in his right shoulder, his hip, his thigh, and his buttocks.
Him and Rashawn, they've been friends since they were kids. And Jug and Cujo, I call him Cujo, but they grew up together. You know what I'm saying? He been there. He was a good friend of Jug. Him and Jug were good friends.
I was able to interview him at the hospital. He was in a lot of pain. He was wanting to get his pain meds, but I also needed to speak with him while he had a somewhat of a clear mind. Tell me what happened.
Oh, we were just standing out there talking about my homeboy. We were just talking about what happened.
They were there to shoot a rap video the next day. They were wanting to, get a lay of the land and see where they were going to put different props at and all this stuff. So they were in a deep conversation with each other. And he said a car pulls around the horseshoe, comes up to where they're at, and immediately gunshots start sounding off. Who started shooting?
I can say so. Car came from the bottom of the road.
What did the car look like?
A great car. I can't see no kind of car.
Small car, big car?
It's kind of small.
Gray, small car?
So,
Did you recognize anybody in it?
so,
Drug money? Does he got to beef with anybody?
no, sir. You local rap?
Okay, any idea who shot you?
No, sir, not whatsoever.
Somebody's got to beef with somebody.
Yeah, I can say that. Yes, sir, I know they do.
I think he was being honest with me. He didn't know who the shooters were.
Investigators learned that a third man drove Brandon and Rayshawn to the hospital.
I spoke with the police officers that were on scene there about the vehicle, got all that settled about, having the vehicle towed and all that. Got a name of the driver who drove them to the hospital, who was no longer on scene. He had apparently drove them to the hospital and left on foot. But I did get a phone number for him, so I was able to call him. He didn't have a whole lot of information either, didn't know who these folks were that shot at him.
Following the interview, Detective Barton heads to the crime scene.
So as I'm pulling up, obviously there's a lot of cops out there. The scene's secured, it's blocked off, crime scene tape everywhere. So I get out and I got another detective on scene. He gives me a rundown of what he's got, and there's shell casings in the roadway, there's blood.
We recovered 4 9mm shell casings. So we knew we were looking for a 9mm gun. Most of the people who were there, from my understanding, what I was told when I arrived, either left or maybe they were in a house and not willing to come out.
There was a gentleman that was willing to talk with us on scene that gave us information.
Orlandis Hamilton was the only one who stuck around to talk to us. He was there when it happened, and that him and Brandon Willingham seemed to have a close relationship. He was upset about it, and I thought he was genuine in wanting to help.
He said he saw a silver car. He said that there were 3 gentlemen, 3 black males in the vehicle, and he said that one of them in the front seat passenger was hanging a gun out the window and shooting as they were coming down Oliver Street.
He did not recognize or did not know who they were. He said they all had their hats pulled over their faces.
Aside from a vague description of the car, investigators leave the scene with no leads. They consider whether Brandon and Rayshawn were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
There's a lot of drugs run down there, so, when the shooting first came out, that was the first thing that popped in my mind was a typical drive-by. We've had many a drive-by down there.
Or did Brandon's simmering fame have something to do with his death?
Did a business deal go bad? Did he treat somebody wrong?
In the rap world, beefs arise, they do diss tracks on each other, and then people get mad about that. We really had to look and see if he had any other problems with another rapper, local or otherwise. Atlanta's not that far from here, so we've had times where people come up from Atlanta and do drive-by shootings here. So that was something we had to explore. All these things are possibilities.
Brandon, he ain't never rap about shooting nobody and all that gangster stuff. So he would never talking about killing nobody in his music. He just talked about the way he wanted to live, like the trap life. He wanted money, cars, females, the fast way. That's what he wanted to do. And to the day they still listen to his music. I can walk in the club, and the DJ, I'll give me a shout out, and he'll drop my son music just like that, like, boom, drop it. If I'm in there, whether I'm not in there, Jud Money getting played in one of these clubs. So you gonna hear that name for a long time. He only had 2 mixtapes, but they was classics. So they gonna hear about Jud Money, because I'm gonna keep his name out there till I leave here.
As investigators in Anderson, South Carolina dig into a double shooting that left 1 man dead, they take a closer look at the victim, Brandon Jug Money Willingham.
We have to keep an open mind about all the possibilities of why this specific person was killed. We usually do a deep dive into that person. We call it victimology. He was known as Jug Money. My understanding is he was getting pretty close to making it big. And so that was, of course, something that we had to look into.
Brandon was a well-known rapper in the area. It could be someone he had a beef with.
Brandon's family insists he had no enemies.
He did not have no beef with people, not that I know of. I never seen him out fight nowhere, fight somebody called him, come on, fight one fight. Nah, I never seen him do that. He stayed in the studio too much.
In fact, they say Brandon was a role model to those who were on the wrong side of the law.
He opened up doors and let them know, like, you can make it, especially when it comes to doing something other than illegal stuff, fighting, gang banging, drugs, anything like that.
Investigators find nothing in Brandon's life that points to a suspect. So they take a different approach.
The day of the incident that Brandon Willingham was killed, earlier in that day, there was another shooting that happened nearby at a gas station.
It was a rough gas station. I mean, I've probably made 30 arrests there myself.
And we started digging into that one to see if it may be related to this one, because typically these shootings all intertwine somehow. During that investigation, we determined that there was a subject who checked into the hospital from a gunshot wound that morning. The name that checked in was Rores Patterson.
But when detectives checked security video from the gas station, they recognized the victim as someone else.
The person who checked in was not Rores Patterson. We were able to pull video and see that, and we determined that the person that checked in was actually Rores' brother, Anthony Patterson, who goes by the street name of D. So that starts throwing up red flags. Why is, Rores, name being used, but it's not Rores.
A little digging gives them an answer.
We determined Anthony had a warrant on him, and he was concerned they were going to call the cops to the hospital. So that's why he used his brother's name, his brother being Rores Patterson.
No arrests have been made, but word on the street was that the shooting was the result of beef between Anthony and another man.
He goes by the street name Hitman. He's well known to us. They had gotten into an altercation. And Anthony was shot by Hitman. That case was never reported because Anthony doesn't want to report anything to the cops. And obviously, Hitman's not going to report it. We have not approached Anthony or anybody because we didn't have anything other than just words on the streets. And obviously, we want some kind of evidence. I only got one shot to interview him, so I want to make sure I got my ducks in a row when I do.
But investigators don't see an obvious link between the gas station shooting and Brandon's death. In the meantime, the tip line has been ringing off the hook.
So with this being a local rapper and the following he had, there's obviously a lot of people knew about this, and so as any crime, you're getting a lot of tips. So we had tips come in that we were immediately able to say, no, that's not the case, and it was easy to disprove it. You had other tips come in with very limited information that you couldn't even act on. Each tip that came in, we looked at and was able to determine that was not our person.
Then, 2 days after the shooting, a tip comes in from Brandon's father.
He was telling us that he had met with a subject by the name of David Bennett, and that David Bennett had information on the case and claimed that he was present when it happened.
I did an interview with him. It was brief. He was still obviously very upset about his son's death, but he wanted to pass along this information.
Kelly tells Detective Hill about his conversation with David.
They met at a little rundown restaurant where David proceeded to tell him all the details.
He told me everything that happened. Say the boy, his brother had got shot or something. So he wanted to go get some revenge.
The shooter was identified as Roy Rez Patterson. He thought he was seeking payback for someone that shot his brother earlier the same day.
David is in the back seat of the car, and that Rorez was the shooter, and there was another subject driving the car.
Dude reached out the window and said he ain't even look, just reached out the window and started shooting. He didn't even look at nobody, just started shooting out the window. He shot my son one time, shot Cujo 4 times.
My next big thing was I got to find David.
We found his last known address in our system, and we went to that house. It turns out that was his grandparents' house. Nobody knew where David Bennett was. Wouldn't give us any information. I felt like he was being a little, I felt like Mr. Bennett's grandfather was withholding some information. I thought he knew more than he was telling us.
David Bennett works at McDonald's, so I go to McDonald's. David hadn't shown up for work all week, which is not uncommon. You know, when you're involved in a shooting, you're concerned about retaliation, so you try to lay low.
The next day, Detective Barton gets a phone call.
I was driving down the road when he called me, and I couldn't believe it, because we never get calls like this. So I pulled over on the side of the road, and he and I talked for a little while, and he told me that he was in New York. He wouldn't come back. He said he's, concerned with retaliation. He's not coming back to Anderson, but he did agree to meet with me if I could fly to New York.
South Carolina detectives get their first big break in the killing of rapper Jug Money when witness David Bennett agrees to talk to them. 2 investigators fly to New York, where they interview 24-year-old David Bennett in a hotel room.
It's really unorthodox to do anything like that, but he didn't want to meet me at the police station. He's fearing he's going to jail. I'm not there to lock him up. I'm there to try to get information.
All right, thank you. All right, we're recording right there on video, and I'm recording right here on the audio recorder. All right, well, man, first off, right there, and I appreciate you coming up, talking with me. You there on your own free will, right? I told you wasn't under arrest or nothing like that. When we get down here, you leaving, and we going a different way, right? Obviously we're working on the murder that happened down in Anderson County, correct? Yeah. All right, and if you don't want to talk to me, you ain't got to talk to me, sure. It's up to you, all right? I'm just going to get this over. Okay.
David tells the detective that he was at a party with his friend Terrence West the night Brandon was shot.
David and Terrence are just friends. Terrence is actually Rorez's uncle.
Rorez and his brother D was over there. They was drinking, playing cards, whatever.
Roy Rez and his brother were discussing the shooting that happened earlier that day when Anthony took a bullet in the leg.
They was fighting at the store, and Hitman pulled his gun out and shot him.
So when they're at the party, David wants to go buy drugs. So he and Terrence are going to go buy drugs.
They were going on 11 o'clock, and she was like, man, let's go get some more weed real quick.
As they get to the car, Rorez is already at the car and jumps in.
They piled into Terrence's car, a silver Mitsubishi Mirage. David got in the back seat.
When they pull onto the horseshoe, they come around to the other end. And as they're approaching the end, there's 4 or 5 guys on the street corner.
I'll get ready to hop out the car. They ask somebody for the weed.
Roy S. Patterson just opened up fire, and then Roy S. said, drive, drive, drive.
David says he doesn't know what's happening. He jumps back in the car, and Roy S. is telling Terrence to go.
He told me that we ain't see nothing, we don't know nothing.
Did he say why he shot at him?
And he said, wow.
What did you think it was?
I thought it was over his brother getting shot, but like I said, I don't even know why.
When they got back to the party, Roy Rez approached his brother.
He told him, I got the man that shot you. He ain't jumping around, I got him.
But based on what investigators know, it was Hitman who shot Anthony, not Brandon.
He looks very similar to Brandon. The dreadlocks, the stature, all that matched. Especially you're driving through at night. It's not a well-lit area.
Could this have been a case of mistaken identity? Is it the case that Roy Rez Patterson was seeking payback for the person he thought shot his brother?
David Bennett says he and Terrence immediately leave. They go back to Terrence's apartment and hang out all night long, watching the news for what's going on, and that's when they start realizing someone was killed.
Police put together a photo array.
So we're on the phone back with detectives in Anderson, trying to get lineups emailed to me. Once we get those, I show them to him. He picks out Roy Rez Patterson as who he only really knew by Roy Rez. And D, he picks out Anthony Patterson, and he only knew him by D, as Roy Rez's brother. And then he also picked out a photo lineup of Terrence West, who the driver was. The first thing I want to do is find Terrence West. So I want to find Roy Rez too, but Roy Rez being the shooter, I want to save him for last because I want everything I can get before I get to Roy Rez.
When they get back to South Carolina, detectives find that rumors of Roy Rez's involvement have arrived ahead of them. Tension is at a boiling point.
People who knew Brandon Willingham, these people cared about him. They really wanted payback for what happened to Brandon.
The retaliation culture around here is serious. I mean, the people really stand on business when it comes to the people that they love.
Someone shot up the home where Roy Rez and his brother had been on the night of the shooting.
There had been a barbecue going on out there. Somebody easily could have been killed. This is a dangerous, dangerous situation. Not long after that, Roy Rez's vehicle at his girlfriend's house was set on fire.
So we saw this uptick in violence of people trying to flush out the killer.
But Roy Rez is staying out of sight.
So I had probable cause to sign warrants. I've already been to Roy Rez's house at East Market Street. Nobody's coming to the door for me over there. Terrence West, on the other hand, needs a job, so he went on to work. We located Terrence at the manufacturing facility. We told him he was under arrest. I transport Terrence myself back to the office. We have an interview room set up where I wanted to take him in there and speak with him. I read him his Miranda rights, and then I just asked him what happened. He told me the story. The story he gave was almost to the detail of what David Bennett's story was.
Police charged Terrence West with accessory after the fact of murder and attempted murder.
His actions after the shooting is what got him charged. He had multiple opportunities to step forward and tell us what happened.
The same day that Terrence is arrested, also the day of Brandon's funeral, Roy Rez Patterson turns himself in.
Roy Rez apparently can't take the heat. He was seeking payback for who he thought shot his brother, but the streets and the fans of Brandon were also seeking their own payback.
So he contacted our warrants guy, said, you know, I know I got warrants on me, I'll turn myself in. So he was there that afternoon.
7 days after the death of Brandon Willingham, investigators finally interview his alleged killer, Roy Rez Patterson.
I brought him to the office, the same as any other suspect. You know, I try to build a rapport with him, go back and forth. I Mirandize him, and we start talking about this case. And from the beginning of that interview, I knew that he was not fixing to confess to this crime.
I know what happened. I've already had several people tell me, witnesses, people that were there, people that were in the car with you. Yeah. So
I don't know nothing about nothing.
Lying to me, well, did you know that?
I ain't lying about nothing.
He leaned back and smiled at me and said, "You got the wrong guy." When you have an attitude like that, it's going to be hard to get a confession.
Roy Rez says he never left the party that night.
Well, what about when you and David and T were riding that night?
I didn't get a car key.
Well, why are both of them saying you did?
I didn't get a car key.
Okay.
All right.
Do you own any guns?
No, sir.
So that's the story you're sticking with?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Patterson had several days to get rid of the gun, so of course he wouldn't tell us where the gun is. And, you know, looking for a gun, especially here in the South, that's a needle in the haystack.
He claimed that we had the wrong person, and throughout the entire interview just sat and smiled at me.
You didn't sit there smiling all you
No,
want.
I got this straight up.
But when we go to court and the judge reads out murder, I want you to smile again, okay?
I ain't smiling
I
no
don't
murder.
want you smiling.
I ain't smiling no murder, because I didn't murder nobody.
Well, you got a murder charge.
I didn't murder nobody.
So you can get right with it, or you can sit there with a smile on your face saying you didn't do it.
It's my word against your word. I didn't do no
You
shit.
can stick with that story, but every dude out there knows you did it.
And that's how the streets talk. The streets don't talk like that, but I'm a working man.
He kept saying that he was a working man, that I got the wrong guy.
I didn't shot and kill nobody. I work for it. I got a family.
I understand you work.
Yeah, I work and I don't bother nobody.
But that don't mean you wasn't out Saturday night in that car.
But it was funny, he hadn't been to work all week, and he's not sick. So, you know, there were some pieces of his story that he told me that we could prove that he was lying.
And I got two witnesses that were in the car with you. So
I got my witness.
Who?
My family, where I was at.
He gave me names of folks that were at his party who could vouch for him to say he didn't leave all night long. So now we have to start finding those people, because if there is someone who can vouch that he was there all night long, then I've got the wrong guy, and that's the last thing I want, is the wrong guy. As much as I want justice for the family, I definitely don't want to arrest the wrong guy.
Your uncle says you did.
I didn't do it.
Okay. Like
That's my word against his word.
I got two people's word that were there, so you was the one shooting.
We charged Roy Patterson with murder and attempted murder for the attempted murder of Rayshawn Cowan and the murder of Brandon Willingham.
Following the arrest, investigators follow up on Roy Rez's alibi by talking to the party's host.
So when he gives me these names, I start going around interviewing. Several of the names he gave me, one of them, the guy wasn't even in town. Said he was in the military in North Carolina, so wasn't even there. Another guy says, yeah, I was there, but I didn't come till after their house had been shot up. So I was not at the barbecue. Don't know if he left or not. Another name was his sister. I asked her, were you there with them all night? And she admitted, well, there was a time they could have left that I don't know about it. That right there is enough that she cannot be a good witness for Roy Rez if she can't physically say, I saw him all night long. Nobody could vouch for him all night long at being at that house. Anything he gave me, we were able to tear it apart.
Both David Bennett and Terrence West agreed to testify against Roy Rez at trial.
How many uncles are gonna try to convict their own nephew? So I thought that was really good. Their stories are pretty doggone similar. So I thought it was a decent case in that aspect.
But will it be enough?
We didn't have any physical evidence tying Roy S. Patterson to this case, to this murder. We had 2 witness statements, and that was it.
Remember trying. 25th, 2016. Nearly 2 years after the shootings of Brandon Willingham and Rayshawn Cowan, Roy Rez Patterson goes on trial for murder and attempted murder. Brandon's family watches in court.
All I can see was an ugly monster sitting there. I cannot believe this ugly human took my beautiful child, who has so much going for him.
Everybody was so confused. We don't even know him, the guy who killed him, Roy Rez. We don't even know you to even see why you would even have a problem with a 20-year-old rapper.
According to the state, the motive is revenge. But the real tragedy is that Roy Rez killed the wrong man.
Unfortunately, Brandon was in the wrong place at the wrong time that night, there for a legitimate purpose, scouting for a music video, and it just happened to be when this group of guys rolled through. Roy S. Patterson saw Brandon Willingham, thought it was Hitman. It was dark, not a well-lit area. They looked very similar, and that's when he opened fire. I think his emotions took over. He saw the guy who shot his brother in his mind, and he was going to get him back.
Carlandis Hamilton takes the stand and describes the heartbreaking minutes after the shooting took place as he tried to help Brandon.
Carlandis was the one holding him when blood was coming out of his mouth, and he said he was slapping Brandon in the face, telling him, stay with, don't leave.
He explained, like, the sounds my brother were making, like, basically saying that my brother died right then and there.
Carlandis gives a description of the car from which the shots were fired.
Carlandis Hamilton had described the silver boxy kind of SUV. It was a Mitsubishi SUV.
He reported seeing a silver box-type vehicle drive around the horseshoe just before the shots rang out and then speed away. We determined that Terrence West was driving a silver Mitsubishi Mirage, which is a box-type vehicle, and it belonged to his girlfriend.
His testimony backs up accounts from the prosecution's 2 star witnesses.
We watched Terrence West get on the stand. David Bennett came back to South Carolina, took the stand, gave his version of the events.
They told almost the same exact story, and they both admitted to being in the car when this happened. Terrence is Royez's uncle, so when your family's testifying against you, it kind of adds a little bit of credibility to that because people expect families to cover for each other.
Roy Rez does not take the stand.
The defense was with the wrong guy, that his client was nowhere involved.
In Roy Rez's defense, his attorney argued that in the car that the drive-by shooting took place, there were 16 fingerprints found, and none of them matched Roy Rez. And also, police never recovered a murder weapon. None was ever found.
After 3 days of trial, both sides rest.
And in the end, the jury found him guilty.
He has to do 35 years, day by day, no parole, no probation. Yeah, it's straight time.
They should have gave him life without parole. You took my son's life. You should not have another chance to come out either.
The people killed my brother. I don't forgive them for what they did. I probably never will, but in my heart, I don't just hate these people. God got me just like God gonna have y'all and deal with y'all in his own way.
Brandon's fans still mourn the loss, and for his family, the pain cuts just as deep today as it did when Brandon died.
I miss him, and excuse me if I'm about to cry, but yeah, they did something to me. It really did. It crushed me. That's my only boy. And for him to do that to my son, when my son didn't do nothing to nobody, to harm nobody, the only thing he cared about is making music. And that crushed me. I just wish he could have lived a little longer to see where his potential would have took him.
He was more than a son. Brandon was my friend. He was like my best friend. I'm so glad God gave me 20 years with him. He could have gave me none, so at least I got 20.
He was living a good life. A steady girlfriend, popular in the neighborhood. He was that kind of guy that everyone loved. But eventually, everything comes back up.
Someone was banging on the door, and when it was open, bullets began to fly. And then he was dead before he even knew it.
You know the old proverb, revenge is a dish best served cold.
I believe that the loss of his mother set him up for years of trauma, and the loss of his best friend was the tipping point.
On the surface, this case sounds simple, but it's really not.
It looks like that we have two individuals, one who was seeking revenge and one person who was a victim. But that's not actually the case.
A little after 9:30 p.m. on March 30th, 2009, Northampton County Police respond to panicked calls about a shooting in Easton, Pennsylvania.
According to multiple 911 calls, a masked gunman stormed into the Easton Cafe. He opened fire on a crowded bar.
The police are on the way to the scene with shots fired. They don't know if they still have a suspect on the scene, how many people are injured, or if anybody's even dead. They're not even sure what they're walking into for their own safety. When the police arrive, it's chaos. People are screaming, running around, crying. And there's a man laid on the floor that obviously took the brunt of this attack.
It was a miracle no one else was shot. There were bullet casings all over the cafe.
The victim is well known by cafe employees. A 24-year-old man named Miguel Aponte.
This was a guy that was a regular at the bar a few times a week. This was a guy that everyone knew, and suddenly one of their own, one of their family, was hurt.
Miguel was born on May 16, 1984, in Phillipsburg, New Jersey.
He had two other siblings. They were close-knit. They spent time together. They were a typical American family.
The family eventually spread out across the Lehigh Valley region, and Miguel quickly formed a tight group of friends in Easton, Pennsylvania.
He was popular in the neighborhood. He was that kind of guy that everyone loved.
Miguel had a girlfriend that he loved very much. Matter of fact, they even had a beautiful daughter together. They had their own little family and were trying to make their own way.
Unfortunately, the pressure to provide for his family led Miguel to make some bad choices. He started dealing drugs in the local Easton area. A life of crime came with risks, not the least of which was getting caught.
In 2006, he found himself with a weapons charge. He was actually sentenced to 6.5 years. But he was released a little bit early from prison. He served about 2.5 years. When he got out, he immediately went back to his family. It was business as usual. It was being a girl dad. It was spending time with his girlfriend and reconnecting over the 2 years that he had lost.
Miguel was really trying to turn his life around. He realized he lost a lot of time with his daughter, and he was working hard to be a good dad and provider.
But his second chance has come to a violent end. First responders determine Miguel Aponte is dead at the scene of the shooting at a bar in Easton. Now, detectives need to figure out what happened.
Within the bar, Miguel's body was located on the floor next to a side door that goes out to an alleyway, where it appears the gunman had entered from that side door, shot Miguel, and then fled out the same way he came in.
Miguel was shot 6 times. Once while he was seated. As he fell toward the floor, he was shot again. And when he hit the floor, shot several times after.
Near the side exit, police find spent shell casings.
There are several different shell casings on the ground of different colors, different varieties, but they all seem to fit a .40 caliber handgun.
This could mean there was multiple shooters, or it also could be different brands of bullets. The only way to confirm this is through ballistic testing.
Detectives send the casings to the State Police Crime Lab for ballistics and DNA analysis. And they interview witnesses, hoping someone can ID the shooter.
Police question the bar owner. He says it was a typical night. All the regulars had come in, everyone was having a good time.
The owner tells police that around 9 p.m. he locked the front door, something he did every night to prevent latecomers, and a sign for customers to finish their drinks and leave.
Everyone knew if there was some reason that they had to come back in the bar, they were to go around to the side.
When he heard someone knocking on the side door a few minutes later, he assumed it was a regular patron who'd left something behind. But what was knocking on the door was death.
When the bar owner opened his side door to the bar that night, he immediately saw a man, face covered in a white t-shirt, with a gun in his hand. The owner ducked to the floor and the gunman opened fire.
So police had to ask themselves, was McGill actually the intended target? Or did he happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time? Could they have been wanting someone else and he just happened to be in their seat? Something that we have to look at.
The owner thinks the gunman was a light-skinned black man, but the mask made it hard to tell. It wasn't anyone he recognized, and he has no idea what prompted the shooting.
The bar owner was totally confused. He told police that he didn't have any enemies, that this bar had been open for years. This was a place that everyone could come to and feel safe and be safe.
But Easton, over the last several years, crime has steadily increased, seeing more gang activity and more violence.
This homicide occurred within the Easton Cafe bar, which is located in the downtown part of Easton. It's an area that's well known to Easton Police Department. It's one of the locations that many of our criminal gang members and or those involved with drug transactions can be located.
Given Miguel's history with drug dealing, is it possible his past finally caught up with him?
Miguel had been working hard to turn his life around. He needed to provide for his daughter, but sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes it's actually easier to slip back into your old ways. With the easy money, it's a hard thing to say no to.
You automatically, as a detective, start to think about who is he associated with, who was he maybe fighting during that time.
Non-drowsy Claritin D knocks out your worst allergy symptoms, including nasal
Pennsylvania police are investigating the murder of 24-year-old Miguel Aponte, who was shot and killed at a bar in Easton. With gang activity on the rise in the area, they wonder if the shooting is part of a drug-related turf war.
Miguel had run in those circles for years, so it's really easy to see how he could end up in the middle of an incident between drug dealers or gangs.
The theory is supported by the fact that, out of all the patrons in the bar, Miguel was the only one shot.
It doesn't make sense the shooter could go into the bar spraying bullets randomly and only hit one person. And witnesses in the bar confirmed that the shooter was definitely targeting Miguel.
Miguel Aponte was sitting very close by, so the shooter came in and had a clear line of sight.
Unfortunately, none of the eyewitnesses can identify the gunman. They can't even agree on a general description.
This shooting happens after hours, and it's a very chaotic scene. So chaotic that people are unsure about the race of the person. The immediate identification comes back as a white person, but some of the witnesses say black.
But they did recognize another suspicious man in the bar that night. A man who seemed to be keeping tabs on Miguel.
He was whispering on his cell phone. He was staring at Miguel. Shortly thereafter, he got off the phone and left the bar. As soon as he did that, the gunman stormed the bar. Witnesses think that possibly this had something to do with Miguel Aponte's murder.
The man on the phone is identified as a bar regular named Frank Bart.
Frank lived above the bar where Mr. Aponte was shot.
Frank was in his mid-30s. He had been involved in crime pretty much his whole life. He even had convictions for theft and assault on his record.
However, when investigators try to question Frank, he's nowhere to be found. Then, the crime lab delivers its findings.
When police received the ballistics report, it showed that the shell casings had come from the same gun, meaning all the different bullets had been fired from the same gun. However, there was no DNA left on the bullets or any other evidence available.
The only thing that's clear is someone wanted Miguel Aponte dead. To find out who, investigators canvass the neighborhood, talking to anyone they can find over the next several months.
This is a small town, and so police bring in a series of people who are persons of interest.
No one confesses to anything, but over time, a story begins to emerge. One that might explain why Miguel was targeted.
Some people think this was a retaliatory shooting, which was a result of a shooting that occurred several years before.
The original shooting took place in 2006 outside a strip club. Jason Oliver was the victim. He was known as Baby J, and he was well known to the police.
Earlier, what happened to Baby J was he was involved with the stabbing that happened closer to his home. And the people who were involved wanted to make sure that he did not say anything to police.
One night after that stabbing, Baby J was at the strip club with his best friend, Jacob Holmes.
These two old friends got together at a bar for a drink. When they were leaving, they were met by two other men outside. Shots rang out, and Baby J was dead.
That's when Mr. Holmes started to run and was subsequently shot.
In that 2006 case, detectives were able to move fast.
The investigation quickly narrowed down to two suspects, John Logan and Miguel Aponte.
Police arrested both men, but they had no physical evidence implicating Miguel Aponte.
The prosecution made a deal with Mr. Aponte just so that they could prosecute Logan for the death of Mr. Oliver.
Miguel Aponte was going to be a cooperating witness.
In the 2006 shooting, Miguel pled guilty to weapons charges. He only got 2 years in prison. Logan, he pled guilty to third-degree murder, and he got 20 to 40 years in prison.
People knew that Baby J was dead. People knew that Mr. Holmes had been shot and still had pieces of a bullet in his body that he would have to deal with for the rest of his life. People were clocking, waiting for Mr. Aponte to be released.
When Miguel got out of prison, at least one of those people might have been waiting for him, Jacob Holmes. Holmes seems to have every reason to want Miguel Aponte dead. But this new suspect poses a different kind of problem for investigators.
Jacob Holmes was a person who was known to a lot of people. Part of the notoriety came from having an uncle that was famous, former heavyweight champion Larry Holmes.
Larry Holmes is from Easton. He grew up right around here.
The Holmes family came here as part of the Black migration from the South. Jacob Holmes Jr.'s grandparents saw this as an opportunity to achieve the American dream. However, when they arrived here, there were a number of obstacles. A lot of the members of the Holmes family had to go to work early. They had to drop out of school. Larry Holmes found a way in life through boxing and eventually became one of 4 people to knock out Muhammad Ali.
Jacob Holmes, being Larry Holmes' nephew, the former world heavyweight boxing champion, he's what we call local famous. Everybody knew who he was. So the prosecution had to be careful that they had the right person. They weren't prosecuting just because he was Larry Holmes' nephew.
A year into their investigation of the murder of Miguel Aponte, Pennsylvania police have a person of interest. 28-year-old Easton native, Jacob Holmes. They think Jacob wanted Miguel dead because Miguel was involved in an earlier shooting that injured Jacob and killed his friend, Baby J.
Jacob seeing his best friend gunned down and him also being shot, that's a good recipe for someone wanting payback.
On April 20th, 2010, investigators tracked Jacob down for an interview.
When the police initially interviewed Jacob, he said he heard someone went in the bar with the AK-47 shooting it up. Jacob told the police that during the shooting, he was with family all night. And at the time, police actually confirmed that that's where he was.
That particular night happened to be one of his children's birthdays. The family was celebrating a birthday at the home of his father, Jacob Holmes Sr. There are plenty of Facebook photos, family photos that demonstrate that that night the family was celebrating that child's birthday.
Not only does Jacob have an alibi, both his reputation and his family name make it difficult to imagine him being a cold-blooded killer. When Jacob's uncle, Larry Holmes, became heavyweight champion, he made sure his extended family was taken care of.
We came from poor, but once Larry made it, we all made it. I had a big house and a big yard with the pool and everything. Jakey was born in 1980. And at that time, me and Larry used to roll dice together at Caesar's Palace. And I would shake it for a long period of time before I rolled the dice. And Larry said, "Come on, Shaky, roll the dice." And then my son was born a couple weeks later. I said, "I guess we're gonna call you Shaky Jake." Me and him did everything together. When I used to go to the gym, he used to fall asleep on the floor or on the table, and Larry, who used to be boxing, he was always there with me. He never left my side.
Jacob's mother died when he was young, so he spent a lot of time at his grandmother's house on the other side of town. That's where he came to feel most at home.
When he was in elementary and middle school, he was bused over to this white area, but he would hang out with the people who were in Easton. So he ended up having this divided life. He always had 2 different sets of friends. So he had difficulty trusting people. He had difficulty figuring out where he belonged.
They didn't care that he was Holmes. He was just Jacob, the local guy that was their buddy that they hung out with.
When he lost his mom, that changed his whole world. And so essentially, when he made a friend, he made that friend for life. And so that really describes his relationship with Baby J.
But as the boys grew into men, they began to head in opposite directions.
Baby J had been involved with people who were known to others as gang members.
We're talking about people that were in the ages of like 18, 19, 21, 22. You know, they were very young, and yeah, they had some run-ins with the police.
While Baby J was becoming more involved in the streets, Jacob was starting a family of his own.
His girlfriend lived in New York, so his first child was born in New York. She had the baby on the 6th of January, like 2:30 in the morning. And he was the happiest person in the world.
But the joy of that moment was muted by another family tragedy.
We were supposed to go back up the following day, but my mother passed away 4 hours after Jakey's first kid was born. Hard on him because every day he celebrated his daughter's birthday, he had to remember his grandmother died that same day.
After the loss, Jacob became even more dedicated to his family and friends.
He got 4 kids, 4 girls, all girls. They all lived with me and he took care of them.
Also, he had a lot of friends because he was the person you could count on.
So, the murder of his childhood friend, Baby J, hit him especially hard.
They hadn't seen each other in a while. So that was part of the reason why he was hanging out at the strip club having the drink, because they were simply catching up.
Jakey was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
But Jacob insists he didn't have anything to do with Miguel Aponte's murder.
Matter of fact, he felt that Miguel had already served his time and already paid for what he did. And according to Jacob, he really wasn't looking for anything further with the incident.
One thing I made assistant to Jakey that you're gonna help the police. And Jakey did that. There was no hesitating, no street revenge, no trying to go out after him or anything. He did what a law-abiding citizen should have did.
Police have no evidence to refute Jacob's claims, and no one at the bar can positively identify him as the man who shot Miguel.
Even with the police questioning everyone and all the witnesses, there were still no clearly defined leads as to who murdered Miguel Aponte.
Then, in 2013, nearly 4 years after Miguel's murder, police get an unexpected break.
Police will listen to jailhouse phone calls, and they gather some really interesting information that they received from those phone calls.
Detectives in the murder of Miguel Aponte get a break in the case when one of their original suspects, Frank Barnt, the man who was on the phone in the bar just moments before the shooting, is arrested for a different crime.
So what seemed unrelated to Miguel's killing, Frank ended up getting arrested for a drug charge and was at a minimum security facility where he had been for about a year.
Investigators begin observing Frank's recorded phone calls from prison and hear some interesting information. Family members have reported to Frank the potential of witnesses of the murder of Miguel coming forward to the police.
Apparently he got scared and decided it's time for him to go, so he escaped.
When he's recaptured just 12 hours later, knowing he will face more charges for the escape, Frank is finally open to cooperation.
What he wants is reduced time, and to achieve that, he makes himself a witness in this case.
He was facing multiple charges that would extend his sentence. Frank didn't want to spend his life in prison.
According to Frank, investigators have already found the man who pulled the trigger, Jacob Holmes Jr. Frank says he knows because he helped him do it.
he positions Mr. Holmes as the shooter in the case and himself as a co-conspirator in the case, and explains what happens that night from his perspective and starts to fill in details.
Frank and Jacob worked together at a tree service, and they had gone fishing together at the Delaware River, where Jacob had told Frank that he wanted to kill Miguel.
Frank says on the night of March 30th, 2009, he went to the bar for a drink.
When Frank walked in the bar, he saw Miguel, and he knew he had to do something. And that's when he made a phone call.
And that phone call was to Jacob Holmes.
Watching Miguel walk around town, do what he wants to do when Baby J is dead. Some people in this town didn't like that and may have wanted payback.
Frank says at that point he agreed to help set things in motion. So he left the bar to retrieve a weapon for Jacob to use.
Frank was the one who told the police, I supplied the gun. I had the mask. He provided information on where Mr. Aponte would be sitting, what Mr. Aponte was wearing.
Frank was a regular at the bar, and he knew how the bar operated. He knew how to get the owner to open the door.
Frank claims Jacob used his t-shirt as a mask so that only his eyes would be visible. Then, gun in hand, Jacob knocked on the door. It's a compelling story, but is it true? Witness statements said the shooter could have been a light-skinned black man or a white man. So was the shooter Jacob or Frank? By his own admission, Frank was at least involved.
He admitted to being the lookout and the other activity involved in it. So he was charged.
Investigators want more proof before they arrest Jacob Holmes.
You want to make sure when you charge someone, particularly a homicide, that you have all the pieces together that you need to prove the case. You only get one crack at this.
Police obtain a warrant to search Frank's phone for a call list of the night of Miguel's murder.
One of those phone numbers, Frank called more than 10 times that night.
A stroke of luck gives investigators exactly what they're looking for. A match for that phone number.
They arrest someone else on a drug charge, and they notice that their number matches a number in Frank's phone, and that particular number belongs to Mr. Holmes.
According to the telephone records, Jacob Holmes was, in fact, the person Frank Barnt called multiple times on the night of Miguel Aponte's murder.
That's when they felt that they had enough information to make the formal arrest of Jacob Holmes in this case.
You've earned this, so hold it up high.
It was during those mid-2000s where cell phones became more and more popular. Previous to that time, to purchase drugs, it was often going to somebody's house, knocking on the door. As cell phones became more popular, drug dealers were obviously using cell phones more. Being interested in the intelligence part of criminal investigations, I took it upon myself to start getting more and more training in cell phone forensics and cell phone records analysis. We started purchasing equipment that allowed us to do those forensic examinations. So as this case unfolded, we started using some of those tools.
Junk sleep got you all.
4 years after Miguel Aponte was killed, Pennsylvania police have 2 suspects in custody. The alleged gunman, Jacob Holmes, the man who turned him in, confessed co-conspirator Frank Barnt. But Jacob continues to insist he's innocent.
When the police brought Mr. Holmes in, His story hadn't changed from the very first time that he talked to police. One of his daughters was having a birthday party that night. As typical in the Holmes family, and it's a very large family, the family was celebrating a birthday at the home of his father.
Frank's story, however, begins to change once he realizes he's also being charged with murder.
Frank's not the brightest bulb in the box. He starts backtracking and trying to take care of himself.
Each time he told the story, he tried to convince the police that he had less and less and less involvement, understanding that the more he talked, the more he implicated himself.
But his changing story also makes him a less believable witness against Jacob Holmes.
Right now, Frank's the only one that can put Jacob at the scene with the gun. Police don't need him changing his testimony on the stand.
Fortunately, a solution soon presents itself.
The police listen to more of Frank's phone calls, and they realize that there's someone else out there that knows what happened that night.
Police heard him talking on the phone to another family member, advising that family member to make sure that his ex-girlfriend stayed in Puerto Rico.
Frank wanted his girlfriend, Carla Miller, out of the country, so she couldn't tell the police what she knew.
Once the police heard those particular phone calls and identified her as a witness, they needed her to come in and convince Frank to continue to cooperate. They found her in Puerto Rico and brought her back.
Carla confirms much of Frank's story, becoming a second witness to what happened that night. According to Carla, Frank went out alone on the night of March 30th, 2009. But shortly after 9:30 p.m., he called her for a ride.
Carla picked up Frank and Jacob, and they were in a good mood. They were cutting up and laughing. They were really happy about something that had happened.
Carla overheard Frank and Jakey yelling at the top of their lungs that payback is a bitch, and that they agreed with each other to take whatever happened to the grave with them.
Carla says the morning after they dropped Jacob off, Frank had her drive him to a nearby park where she watched him throw a handgun into the Delaware River.
Carla said Frank was on the phone talking to someone. He told them on the phone, "Don't worry about it. It's taken care of. Everything's good."
Then Frank told her she had to get out of town.
Frank had instructed her to go to Puerto Rico and to stay there. He was concerned that she might talk.
Ironically, being in Puerto Rico and giving herself time to really think about the situation, she wanted to do the right thing. She wanted to do right by Miguel Aponte.
There are now 2 potential witnesses who can testify against Jacob Holmes. Unfortunately, their statements are still the only evidence prosecutors have.
Numerous searches of the river were conducted to locate the firearm. And eventually a firearm was located, but it was not the same firearm involved in this investigation.
But then evidence develops in a new form when forensic specialists complete the analysis of Jacob's phone records, which show what towers his phone pinged off.
One of the first things that I do when I obtain cell phone records in a criminal investigation is I try to establish patterns. I analyzed Jacob Holmes' cell phone records, and I was able to identify that one specific cell phone tower in the Southside Easton area was likely Jacob Holmes' home tower. Based on that information, now I know where he likely lives, and then I look at the cell phone towers most frequently used. That gives me an idea where his phone is normally at.
And on the night Miguel Aponte was shot, Jacob's phone wasn't near the birthday party where he said he was.
Around the time of the homicide, his phone is utilizing a tower in the downtown Easton area, and more specifically, a sector of that tower which would likely cover the area of Easton Cafe.
It's enough for prosecutors to move ahead with murder charges against Jacob Holmes. Frank Barnt ultimately pleads guilty to conspiracy charges. Jacob Holmes pleads not guilty and faces trial, a trial that will literally be a fight for his life.
The prosecutors were seeking a death penalty for this case because of the involvement of 12 other potential victims.
Can the flavor of a slow-cooked...
2020, more than 11 years after Miguel Aponte was gunned down, Jacob Holmes Jr. goes to trial, charged with first-degree murder. But it's no slam dunk, with little physical evidence and witnesses with conflicting accounts.
When you picked up the newspaper, it looks like to the outside person that we have two individuals, one who was seeking revenge and one person who was a victim. But that's not actually the case. There were a series of incidents that happened that brought these two gentlemen together, that started with people who were unknown to either one of them. And so what became important in this case was to weigh, for not only the defendant, but also for the sake of the victim, what was going to produce a fair and just outcome. There were lots of questions at the time of trial. There were inconsistencies, but the story of revenge was the one that was sown by the prosecutor, that was sown by the police officers, that was connected back to the series of shootings.
Prosecutors described Jacob as a man so angered by the murder of his childhood friend, Baby J, that he laid in wait for 2.5 years to kill Miguel Aponte in retaliation. Jacob's cell phone places him at the scene of the crime, and his confessed co-conspirator, Frank Barnt, provides eyewitness testimony.
What they were able to show was that Frank and Mr. Holmes had communication on the night in question that established that they were together that night long enough where Frank could hand Mr. Holmes a weapon, direct him to where Mr. Aponte was sitting that night in the bar.
You have to remember, when you're relying on testimony of folks who told lots of different stories, you need to have corroborating. So the forensics evidence, as in many cases, and in this case, played a crucial role of corroborating the eyewitness testimony. We also have a ping on a cell tower at exactly this time to corroborate that evidence. One of the fears that every prosecutor has, how's this going to play at trial when you have a witness who told you a couple of different stories and now you want the jury to believe the last one?
The defense also points out that Jacob isn't the only one with motive to kill Aponte.
People were waiting for Mr. Aponte to be released. People were watching his activities. One of those people was Frank. Frank was part of the group that Baby J was involved with, and he was upset about what happened.
And some witnesses described the shooter as a white man, which would match Frank, but not Jacob. The jury ultimately sides with the prosecution.
Since Mr. Holmes, in his communication with the police, had never offered anything that was specific enough to place him outside of the circle of circumstances, it was enough to convince a jury that Mr. Holmes was, in fact, guilty of the shooting of Mr. Aponte. The second phase of the trial, they then had to decide if he would be sentenced to death row or if he would have a life sentence. The types of stories that you'll hear about Jakey are pretty consistent.
He was probably 18. He said, Mom, I'm going to be a rapper.
He changed his name to Jug Money.
Every show we had, it was packed out. Everybody come see him.
We got reported that there were 2 gunshot victims that had arrived at the hospital.
I don't know anything. It's absolute chaos.
He has a lot of fans, so folks are flooding the parking lot.
The day of the incident, there was another shooting.
He wanted to go get some revenge.
I'll be ready to hop on the car.
He looks very similar. The dreadlocks, the stature, all that matched.
Could this have been a case of mistaken identity?
Somebody's got to be for somebody.
I don't know nothing about nothing.